Just want to welcome Professor Marandi onto the show. Professor, thank you so much for taking your time out to join us. How are you?
Thank you very much. I'm very good. Thank
It's
you for
always
inviting.
it's always an honor and a privilege to invite you. The audience has been extremely excited and have given me a number of questions to ask you. And so the negotiations with the United States of America, the US made it look like there was going to be negotiations. They were waiting, and it kind of showed the power dynamic where J.D. Vance was apparently waiting on the plane, ready to get permission to go to Pakistan, but then he was refused permission. And the Iranian delegation with the Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi went to Pakistan, gave his demands in addition to the normal meeting that they had for trade and various other things. And Trump basically said that Witkoff and Kushner are now no longer going. Can you explain to us what exactly happened? Professor, can you hear me? I'm going to just wait for the professor to come back. Oh, here we go.
Is this better?
Much better, thank you.
Okay, good. Well, if you can hear me, I'll respond.
Yeah. Yeah, please do.
Okay. Well, first of all, there was no planned meeting between Iran and the United States, and this is one of the very odd things about Trump, that he was effectively pushing for his uh, negotiators. I'm not sure we can really call them negotiators because neither Vance nor Witkoff nor Kushner are impressive at all at the negotiating table. But in any case, he was pushing for them to go whereas the Iranians said from before the trip that there are no plans to meet the Americans in Islamabad. So why was he pushing for this, and why did he humiliate himself and his so-called negotiators? I don't know. But then again, I don't really understand anything that Trump says or does, because he's always contradicting himself. He's always shifting his position. He's always being dishonest. So I don't understand what the logic was behind this, unless he wanted to sort of imply that we were supposed to have a meeting and the Iranians didn't, and thus justify, or that Iran did not uh, abide by its agreement to have a meeting, let's say, and thus justifying further escalation. The only logical uh, argument that I can think of for him to make this lie and to push this lie that the Iranians were planning to negotiate with the United States in Islamabad but didn't is perhaps this, or it could have just been that he wanted to like push Iran into somehow sitting down and negotiating with the United States, which of course this is not the way to do it. The only way in which we can have further direct negotiations with the United States is if the United States abides by its commitments. We already have a deal. We have a ceasefire deal. You're supposed to have a ceasefire across the region. Across the region. That includes Gaza, that includes Iraq, that includes Yemen, and it includes Lebanon. And Lebanon was named specifically because the fighting in Lebanon was very heavy. This is something that the Americans agreed upon. And the Pakistani leaders, such as the Pakistani Prime Minister, acknowledged this in his social media posts. So when Netanyahu started carpet bombing Beirut in order to wreck the deal, Iran said, fine, you don't want to abide by your commitments, we will not do so either. So Iran continued to prevent extra ships from passing through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, why do I say extra ships? Because Iran allows friendly countries to use the Strait of Hormuz. Iraq has not waged war against Iran. It did not participate in the war, unlike Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Qatar, and which one
UAE.
did I not miss? And Bahrain.
UAE.
Kuwait, Bahrain, the Emirates, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. But in any case, they did not involve. So the extra ships that were supposed to be allowed to leave, or like the Russians and the Chinese, their ships can pass through too, and they do pass through. But the ships that are linked to these five countries, they are not allowed to go because they participated in hostile actions against Iran. So in the ceasefire agreement, Iran was supposed to allow some of these ships to go through in response to the ceasefire across the region. Now, of course, they're slaughtering Palestinians every day, and the ceasefire in Gaza is fake. And we have to remind people day and night that the Americans and the West are allowing the Israelis to murder multiple Palestinians every day in Lebanon, and they're carrying out genocidal strikes in Gaza, and they're carrying out genocidal strikes in Lebanon every day. But in any case, Iran has said that until there's a ceasefire across the region, in particular in Lebanon because of the heavy fighting, we're not going to allow those ships to leave. In addition to that, Iran also said that the Americans have to leave this. Sorry, I'm very exhausted.
I appreciate it.
So they have to lift their siege on Iranian ports as well. So if they don't do these two things, then Iran is not going to allow those ships to go through the Strait of Hormuz. And if they do not do these two things, there's no reason for further negotiations. Because if we're going to have further negotiations, we have to have these issues resolved first. If the Americans are going to refrain from abiding by their commitments now, then when we have further agreements at the negotiating table, why in the world will they abide by those? So the Iranians are saying that unless you abide by your commitments now with regards to the ceasefire, we cannot have further negotiations with you, because such a situation will only incentivize the Americans not to carry out commitments.
No doubt. I did have Hezbollah's lawyer on, and he did explain there could be a mechanism to ensure that they fulfill the end of the deal through escrow and various other things. But Iran came out today and they basically laid out their demands. And what the demands were is, we're not going to even go to the negotiation table until you fulfill the agreement, remove the blockade, unfreeze the assets, and a few other different conditions.
And Lebanon.
And Lebanon as well. And so the question here is that the American blockade is in place, but their blockade is fake. The vast majority of ships have gone through. We were looking at it, almost 5% of ships have been stopped, and actually Iran's stopped the same number of ships. How long can Trump continue in this kind of situation where there's no control of the Strait of Hormuz? There's kind of like a fake blockade. The world financial market is becoming weaker and weaker and weaker, but he's got a mass buildup of military personnel, military aircrafts throughout the region. We've seen a huge movement almost every single day. It shows he's either going to have to, and planning to, have a major escalation, or he's going to have to come to the table, but he doesn't seem to want to do that either.
Well, the Iranians are preparing themselves for war, and they've been doing so ever since the beginning of the ceasefire. So some people wonder why Iran accepted the ceasefire in the first place. It's just like after the 12-day war, Iran accepted the ceasefire and immediately began preparing itself for the next war. And if it wasn't for that, those 8 months or so where Iran prepared themselves, Iran would not have performed so well on the battlefield during this war. So Iran, true, the Americans are bringing troops into the region and new equipment, but Iran is not sitting idle. Iran is doing the same. Yet, meanwhile, Iran is still preventing those extra ships from leaving the Strait of Hormuz. And every minute, literally every minute that goes by, it creates new pressure on the United States and its allies, because the U.S. allies are suffering as a result of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, and so is the U.S. economy. And the pain is going to increase every day. We really do not see how severe the crisis is. We only see, people across the world see a hike in the price of gasoline or a hike in the price of food in the marketplace. But things are much worse than that, and they will begin to become more visible to all of us. So as time goes by, it is going to get more difficult for Trump. Also, a point that we have to keep in mind is that the weather is going to get much warmer in the days and weeks ahead. And those people who are familiar with the Persian Gulf region know that the humidity and heat in countries like the Emirates and Kuwait and so on will become very difficult. And for American soldiers to be based in these countries or to carry out some sort of assault on Iran under these circumstances, it is going to be very, very difficult. We have to remember that when the Americans uh, attacked Saddam Hussein's forces in Kuwait, they did it much earlier in the year. They did it during the cooler period. And the same was true when they invaded Iraq with the help of these very same Arab dictatorships that once upon a time funded Saddam Hussein. The only country in the region that officially opposed the invasion of Iraq was Iran, maybe Syria too at that time. I don't remember. But Iran opposed the war. But these countries, when they assisted the Americans in the invasion of Iraq. But that was done much earlier in the year. It was during the cool period in the Persian Gulf region. Now it's going to get within like a couple of weeks. The pattern every year is that in mid-May it gets hot, and then by the end of May and early June it gets very hot. So that is going to be a big problem for the United States. And also, if the United States attacks Iran and starts striking, for example, Iran's electrical power plants, as Trump keeps claiming he's going to do, then Iran is going to have to retaliate and against the Israeli regime and against these regimes in the Persian Gulf region who are assisting the Americans in carrying out this war. In those weather conditions, if they lose their electricity, people will have to leave the country. They'll have to go to Oman or elsewhere. So this is not a good situation for the United States. The time is not on their side. True, when they block the Strait of Hormuz, it does make life more difficult for Iran. There's no doubt about it. But the Gulf, the Persian Gulf, the ships there, they're saying put too. So the global economy is in very difficult situation. It is getting worse by the day. U.S. troops in the region are going to face more heat and more humidity, and the risks to these family dictatorships in the Persian Gulf who've done such a disservice to their people. They've done such a disservice to their people by aligning themselves with the United States. They could have said no to the United States. They could have said no to war. They can still say it even now. Imagine if the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Kuwaitis, the Bahrainis, and the Qataris collectively said, no, we don't want war. We're not going to be a part of any attack on Iran, and we will not allow our airspace, our territory, or our seas to be used by the United States to assault Iran. The Americans would not be able to launch a war against Iran. It would be over. It's as easy as that. But they just simply don't have the agency to make their own decisions. They're too compromised by, for whatever reasons, the Epstein class being whatever it is, these regimes don't have that ability. So, but in any case, time is not on the side of the Americans. Time is not on the side of Trump.
Time not being on the side of Trump. Yesterday, in the United States of America, there was possibly a third assassination attempt on Trump, allegedly. But that being said, it gave me a thought in my mind, which is he talks about regime change in Iran. He talks about conflict within the Iranian government. And yet, I watch almost daily the Iranian president, Ghalibaf, various others walk the streets of Iran with the people cheering, whether they may have political disagreement or not. And I thought, wait a sec, Trump could never do that. He could never walk the streets of the United States of America. He, even in an enclosed environment, even when there's security, there's still so many attempts allegedly on his life, which shows that it demonstrates the difference. If you talk about real regime change, it seems like the Americans want regime change. What's your thoughts on that?
Yes, and again, you're doing the smart thing by saying allegedly repeatedly, because there are many questions about this assassination attempt. Uh, of course, it's very early, but the previous assassination attempt when he was a candidate was very odd. And when he became president, you'd think that he would have pursued this to the very end. And we see that even former allies of him, like Tucker Carlson and others, are wondering why uh, the assassination attempt has not been fully pursued by the Trump regime. But besides the points that you've raised, uh, you see that Trump has and his Secretary of War, as he calls himself, they've removed multiple generals, and just recently they've kicked out the Secretary of the Navy. So in Iran, we don't see such purges taking place as we do in the United States. In Iran, everyone is at their busy doing their work, and the decision-making process in Iran is very clear. The Supreme National Security Council makes strategic decisions, and with the approval of the leader, they're carried out. The Supreme National Security Council has designated Dr. Ghalibaf to be responsible for the file of negotiations with the United States. So where is the problem for the United States? It's clear who they're dealing with. It is Dr. Ghalibaf, because the constitutional bodies have designated him to be in charge. So what differences and what infighting or what factional hostilities is Trump alluding to? Who knows? But again, it's like everything else that Trump says. I've really stopped following Trump a long time ago, because he says he's always changing his position. I haven't even read or I see this headlines. I do. When I see the headlines, I read the headlines, but I don't watch videos of him speaking, or because it doesn't help me, because he'll say something and then 5 minutes from now he may say something else. He was just recently talking about 3 days from now what will happen to Iranian oil fields. We'll have to see what happens in 3 days. The Iranians have already threatened that if anything happens to Iran's infrastructure, that there will be severe retaliation. But he one day he talks about obliterating Iran. One day he says he obliterated the nuclear program. Then he says Iran is building nuclear weapons. One day he's saying he's going to obliterate Iran. The next day he says he's going to erase a civilization. The day after he extends a ceasefire. Nothing that he says has any, at least for the most part, doesn't have coherence or logic. And if on certain occasions they do, they're so mixed up with nonsense that you cannot figure out which one is actually logical and which one is just nonsense and the ramblings of a president who's not very sane and who's also a psychopath.
Yeah, he's not doing very well with the art of the deal. But look, there's a couple of questions my audience has, which is about the negotiations. The negotiations happened in Islamabad. Today on the show with Nima, you said that apparently, and this is one bit of a clarification, that Dr. Ghalibaf and the foreign minister Abbas Araghchi were discussing directly with Witkoff, Kushner, and J.D. Vance. What form were those direct discussions? Were they together in the same place, in the same room? Was it how did these negotiations occur, and how close were they to an agreement? And the reason I asked that is Scott Ritter claims that you mentioned to him that you were very close to a deal.
No, maybe Scott misunderstood me. What I said was that in Islamabad a couple of weeks ago, we have not had any negotiations with the United States, direct or indirect, except since the war, except for in Islamabad. One day from morning till evening there were negotiations where there were three people on the Iranian side: Dr. Ghalibaf, Dr. Araghchi, the foreign minister, and Dr. Bagheri, who is the deputy for the Supreme National Security Council. On the other side, there was Vance, Witkoff, and Kushner. So there are three on the Iranian side, three on the other side. And then there was the Pakistanis in the room as well. So they negotiated all day. There were agreements on some issues, but the Americans were insisting on issues that were unacceptable to Iran near the end of the day, such as the nuclear program. Iran refused to negotiate the nuclear program. The Iranians said that the basis for our negotiations is the 10-point peace plan, and Trump accepted that. And so for Iran, that is the criteria for the talks. And Iran has actually said today that we're not going to be discussing the nuclear program at this stage. At this stage, we discuss the 10-point plan. So in Pakistan, the Iranians listened to the Americans when they spoke about the nuclear program, but they did not. The Iranians did not offer anything in return because they're not going to negotiate the nuclear program. At this stage, it's about peace. The nuclear program can be discussed later. So contrary to the reports that we've been hearing in the media that the Americans spoke about Iran halting enrichment for 20 years and the Iranians offered, 5 years or 3 years, nothing of the sort was said in Islamabad. So the gap between the two sides remained, but there were certain areas during the day where there was agreement. But then near the end of the day, on some of these issues like the nuclear issue and others, Vance took a very hard line, and basically progress was impeded. And the Iranians felt, so maybe Scott is right in the sense that I was saying that there was some progress during the day, but then later in the day on key issues, the United States was unwilling to be constructive. But in addition to that, the Iranians felt that the American side did not have the authority to make decisions. So when the Iranian delegation was at the negotiating table, they didn't make any phone calls to Iran. Ayatollah Khamenei and Dr. Ghalibaf had already, and the Supreme National Security Council had already agreed upon what was to be negotiated. But Vance, even though he was surrounded by two Israeli agents, he made phone call after phone call after phone call, including to Netanyahu. And Netanyahu himself said that Vance called me and gave me a report, which I think Americans, you'd think that American media would be shocked that he would use such language when this puny colony in the Mediterranean says the prime minister says that the vice president of the United States gives him reports, and he also said that other American leaders give him reports every day. So it says a lot about who's in charge. But in any case, it was very clear that Vance did not have the authority that was necessary to carry out serious negotiations.
You mentioned that there were certain points of agreement. What were those points that you think were in agreement during the negotiations?
I don't think it's for me to give those details because first of all, I wasn't in the negotiating room, and second of all, I think that in order for in future negotiations to take place, it would be best for the negotiators themselves to divulge whatever it is they feel necessary to divulge. But I think that it can be, you can say that some less serious issues were resolved, but for the Americans, they were very insistent on discussing the nuclear program. For Iran, that's not a priority. For Iran, it's a 10-point plan. Iran's sovereignty has to be respected. Terrorism against the Iranian people has to end. Reparations have to be made. There has to be a ceasefire across the region. And the Israelis cannot keep killing people with impunity. And Iran's control of the Strait of Hormuz has to be accepted. Iran did not impose control over the Strait of Hormuz until after this war. It had no intention of doing so before the war. This is something that Trump brought upon himself, and this is something that that Netanyahu brought upon himself, and the same is true with those Arab family dictatorships that were part of this war. They brought about this change in Iranian policy, and it is irreversible. And I can tell you right now that all the ships that right now pass through the Strait of Hormuz, they pay a fee. Every single one of them. Every single ship, except for Iranian ships, that pass through the Strait of Hormuz today and yesterday and the day before, every single one of them have paid a fee. Now countries that are friendly to Iran may be treated differently than other countries, but in any case, everyone pays a fee.
Yeah. That's what I read. I read maybe China and Russia and Spain maybe have got a bit of a dispensation on that. But in terms of the agreement, you mentioned that the 10-point plan is the basis of the agreement. Donald Trump also said that in a post immediately when he, before the deadline of the hour. So this is not something that is like you're coming out with. This is agreed upon by Trump. I guess the question here now is, for there to be subsequent negotiations, do the Americans need to agree to the subsequent demands? And what I mean by that is removal of the blockade, the non-bombing of Lebanon, the giving back of the frozen assets, and then you go to the table to discuss the 10-point plan? Or is it that they need to also accept the 10-point plan before you go to the negotiations? Because I think, again, we're not all clear on that.
No, I think that what you said first is correct. Not just Lebanon, it's a regional ceasefire. I know that in Gaza, we have a fake ceasefire in place. And sadly, all these countries went to Egypt to celebrate Trump when he supposedly when he had that that ridiculous, what should I say, circus to celebrate that fake ceasefire.
Yeah.
But there is no ceasefire. And all these countries whose leaders went to Egypt, where are they now? Why are they not protesting? Why are they not putting pressure on the United States? Every day they're killing kids in Gaza. Every single day. That's supposed to be a ceasefire. What has Hamas done? What has Islamic Jihad done? Nothing. Kids are in classrooms and then suddenly they fall over and they're shot. Their classmates see they're shot in the head. This is what's happening every day in Gaza, and sadly, the anti-war momentum, has weakened. Trump was very successful in wrecking that momentum. In fact, the ceasefire was, in my opinion, that fake ceasefire was all about breaking that momentum. Right now, everyone has to start waking up again. Gaza is dying. The genocide in Gaza continues. Of course, now they're doing the same to the Lebanese people. But at the root of the cause is Gaza. So we have to start waking up. We cannot go back. We cannot remain asleep. The genocide hasn't stopped. So sorry, I digress. But you're correct. In order for direct negotiations to begin, the United States has to implement what it has agreed to do. Otherwise, we can't have talks. It's sort of like I sell you a car, you pay the money, and I don't give you the car. And then I want to sell, another car, or a washing machine to you, or something. And then you say, well, first give me my car, and then we can talk about a washing machine. If you would be a fool to buy a washing machine from me when you paid for a car and I never gave it to you. So the Iranians are saying that unless you implement the deal, I'm not going to phase 2. And Iran itself is not going to implement phase 1. The difference between Iran today and during the JCPOA was that the nuclear deal in 2015 that the Iranians agreed upon, the Iranians implemented their side of the bargain, and then the Americans were supposed to do so too, and they didn't. And Obama cheated Iran. He implemented some of his commitments, and he didn't implement some of the most important ones. The Iranian negotiation today is very different. They say you don't abide by your side of the bargain, we won't abide by our side of the bargain either. You don't stop killing kids in Lebanon, we're not letting any of those extra ships belonging to your allies in the Persian Gulf region to leave the Strait of Hormuz. You impose a siege on our ports, we oppose a siege that affects you and all of your allies. So the equation is different today. Of course, I should add that the situation is very tense. The United States could attack Iran tonight.
Yeah.
We don't know. But Iran is not going to back down. We are steadfast, and we have no doubt that regardless of whatever aggressive acts the United States takes, that we will be able to impose a strategic defeat on the United States. So the smart thing for the Americans to do would be to find despite the fact that the Zionists don't want this, but to find an off-ramp for themselves. And the smart thing for the Arab regimes to do would be to tell the Americans no.
So you mentioned about the Gaza peace bond. I completely agree with you. For me, it's like white collar crime. They're stealing Palestinian land, but through white collar. And you see the people on the board. It's Trump and the Mossad agents that are Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Now, I'm a Sunni, and obviously people are trying to cause sectarian divide in this situation quite a bit. And the mode that they're trying to do it is about Gaza. And they're saying, wait a sec, why isn't Iran including Gaza in the agreement? And even though it's kind of a misnomer because they forget on October the 8th, it was Hezbollah through the conversations they had with Iran that immediately jumped in and stepped in and helped supported the Gazans from day one. There wouldn't even be an issue as much with Hezbollah or if they right now if they didn't support the Palestinian people. But I guess I'm just giving all this information in order to ask you the question that any kind of final agreement, how would you be able to, would you include Gaza into that agreement or Palestine into that agreement? And can you do that because they have their own separate agreement? This is something that I've been speaking to, saying, look, they've got their own agreement. It's going to be a lot more difficult. But if you can kind of highlight or clarify, illuminate us on this issue.
Yeah, that is a big problem. That is a big problem. Countries in the region went and helped Trump impose this ridiculous ceasefire on Gaza, and it's going to be very difficult to fix that. And it's still, when I think about it, it still makes me upset. Remembering those images in Egypt, where I don't want to name the leaders, but you know who they are, who all went there and who all praised Trump and who Trump praised them, and they were all whitewashing this war criminal, this partner in genocide. But I don't know how that can be dealt with. Because there is a ceasefire agreement in place, but in any case, that ceasefire agreement is not being implemented. And in one of the conditions for Iran was they named Lebanon because in Lebanon there was open fighting, but in the ceasefire is supposed to be regional. Now, how can Iran push for that? That's something that the negotiators have to figure out. But people have to remember that the only people who've made sacrifices for the Palestinian people are the Lebanese, are the Iranians, are Yemen, and other resistance supporters, individuals in Jordan who carried out operations, and of course the resistance in Iraq. No one else has bothered to do anything. I mean, governments and people across the world have been protesting, and there's been activism, which has to be revived, in my opinion. There has to be, because Gaza is starving right now, and Lebanon is being added to, they're trying to do a repeat in Lebanon as well, and Western media is trying its best to help the Israeli regime get away with it. But, all of the wars, the maximum pressure sanctions on Iran over the past few days, it's all about Palestine. It has nothing to do with anything but Palestine. And the suffering of the people of Lebanon is simply because they're saying that we will not relinquish the Palestinian people. The same is true with Yemen. So those who are speaking otherwise, first they should, show their own credentials and tell us what sacrifices they've made and which countries or which bodies they're affiliated to. Because many of these people are people. Let's be very blunt. They're on the payroll
Yeah.
of countries like Qatar or the Emirates or Saudi Arabia or anyway, or
Well, I'm
others.
aware of that they've offered people $50,000 per video. So this is known amongst the influencer circles.
Yeah, and the fact is that these governments in our region, including Turkey, I was wondering if I should say it or not, and I mean Erdogan, because I separate Erdogan from the people of Turkey. The people of Turkey are, fantastic and supportive of the Palestinian people, but they do nothing, and therefore, in order to justify their uh, lack of support for the Palestinian people in real terms, not like a few videos on Al Jazeera or I don't know footage showing Israeli crimes on some news channel. I mean real intervention, real support, breaking off ties, breaking off fuel, energy connections, whether it's gas in Egypt or oil in Turkey and Azerbaijan, and so on, breaking off political ties, economic ties, intelligence ties, military ties. You'd be surprised what sort of relationships, and I'm sure you're not. I know you know these things, but people would be surprised to know what the extent of the relationship between regional countries and the Israeli regime. But in any case, those countries that do nothing, they have an incentive to say that others are not doing anything and to raise questions in order to hide the fact that they are completely indifferent to the plight of the Palestinian people. But in any case, the axis of resistance has made huge sacrifices and it will continue to stand for the Palestinian people. And I'm confident that despite the fact that these are very troubling times, that ultimately the Palestinian people will be liberated.
That is the hope. Now, one last question is about, you mentioned about the protests, and I think the protests are extremely important. Now, linking that to the ceasefire, I didn't think the ceasefire was a very good idea, although we see the merits of it because Iran's able to recalibrate. There's a lot of technical situation that they need to get together in order to start the war again. And I know in terms of like reconditioning missiles, and there's various other things you need to do. So I understand the logic from a military perspective, but I guess because I'm on social media a lot and I know the level of influence impact we have and the impact that can occur, I do see a bit of deflation in the support, the high level of support that there was on day 39 and how people were so engaged and entrenched. Now people are like, is this really, like, is it just like a personal thing? Like, there is a lot of, like, there's a deflation of it. And so there's less of a chance of a protest on that. What's your thoughts on kind of that aspect of it?
Well, it's obvious that when missiles fly, they have a different sort of impact on society. But at the end of the day, this is Iran, one country that has been under maximum pressure sanctions for decades, fighting against a huge coalition, against the empire. All the countries in the Persian Gulf, except for Oman and Iraq, were part of this war with all their wealth. They funded these bases. They fund the U.S. War against Iran. And they don't just allow them to be there. They fund their activities in these bases. They support their presence. The Americans don't pay anything for these, for what it does in these bases. So they have a direct relation. So all these countries are involved. Jordan, Amman is involved. Countries like the Republic of Azerbaijan giving cheap oil to the Israeli regime, being an ally of the regime. Turkey, unfortunately, very different from what we were hoping 15, 20 years ago when, back in the day when Mr. Erbakan was the prime minister and the leader of the movement. If someone like him was in power, Israel would be in serious trouble today. But in any case, and then you have the entire West, the collective West, imposing sanctions on Iran, maximum pressure sanctions. So Iran and its allies, Ansar Allah, Hezbollah, the resistance in Iraq, they're facing a huge, powerful foe. And the fact that Iran has achieved so much has been shocking to everyone. But it's like, how should I put it? Iran is fighting a far more powerful enemy, but it is fighting using its faith, its belief, its religious belief, its heritage, its cultural and civilizational heritage against a much more powerful enemy. But it's sort of like, I don't watch sports, and I'm not saying people shouldn't watch sports. It's just, but when I was young, Muhammad Ali was, a very famous boxer. And it's like watching someone like him in the 15th or 14th round and wondering why he isn't punching harder. Well, he's exhausted. They've been fighting for, many rounds, and it's not easy waging war. War is destructive. War destroys, a country's assets. So Iran fought hard. Iran, no doubt, came on top, but Iran also needs to prepare itself for the second round. The United States, true, is reinforcing its assets, but so is Iran. Iran is preparing itself for the fight to come. Does that mean that we should have war? No, if we can end this peacefully in a just manner and to consolidate the resistance, that would be excellent. But if the United States insists on imposing its hegemonic rule, then war will continue, no doubt. But I think instead of people grumbling about Iran, grumbling about the resistance, they should grumble to themselves and to each other about their lack of will to go out in the streets, to protest, to be socially active. Posting a few memes or a few posts on X is not enough. It's not enough. People have to be on the streets. People have to make their own sacrifices peacefully, but but they have to assert themselves. They have to put pressure on governments to bring about change. We're all responsible, but everyone should not be expecting Iran to do all the heavy lifting and they sit down at home on their cell phones and liking posts and reposting posts and thinking that that's enough.
True, completely agree with you. I know it's the last question, but I just seen a report about the UAE, the Emirates. They have been complicit in this more than anyone else. They allowed their airspace to be used. They allowed their bases to be used. They allowed a direct attack on Karg Island from two areas. One was Dubai, and I believe the other one was Ras Al Khaimah. Now we have reports that the Israelis were giving them the their defense systems, the Patriot systems, the
Iron Dome.
The Iron Dome, and not only that they were basically holding Israeli military assets within the country. What is the level of complicity of this country? Like, it is just unbelievable. Never mind the financing of hatred against Muslims in Europe, and then financing extremism. So they finance the extremism, and then they finance the Islamophobia industry, the hatred against Muslims, the things they did in Sudan. All of these things, that the treatment of the underclass in their country. What does this say about this country in terms of almost being the sister country? We call it East Israel, in terms of its actions and its direct involvement in this war.
Well, you've said it all. I mean, in Somalia, in the Sudan, in Yemen, their role has been that of supporting whatever the agenda of the Israeli regime is. That's what they've been doing. And it is an utterly corrupt regime. Its banks are basically for money laundering. All the drug trade in Afghanistan, the money goes through the Emirates. It is utterly corrupt. The oil that is stolen from African lands as a result of these civil wars that these regimes help fund goes through the Emirates. So, and of course, but the thing is that the Iron Dome did not help them. Iran hammered the Emirates harder than any other of these regimes that were complicit, basically because, as you pointed out, it is like the Israeli regime. It is a second Israeli regime, and sadly, it's very sad that so much wealth in the Persian Gulf, in Qatar, and the Emirates, and Saudi Arabia, all that wealth, none of it goes to helping the resistance. None of it goes to helping uh, Hamas or Jihad or Hezbollah or Ansarullah. If even one of these countries flipped, they would have the full support of the axis of resistance, and that wealth would go a long way to changing the balance of power in Palestine. But unfortunately, all these five countries, along with others, they're just proxies.
No doubt, no doubt. Professor Marandi, always appreciate you coming on. You've been so enlightening and illuminating in terms of your answers. We'll put your Twitter page on. I know you're banned from everybody else. I know there's an AI version of you on YouTube, and a few people even possibly. Someone was like, Professor Marandi saying Iran destroyed all 3 USS carriers, and I was like, that's an AI version. That's not Professor Marandi. But thank you so much for taking your
Yeah,
time.
I don't have any YouTube channels, and the only places I do interviews on YouTube are known entities. So yeah, I mean, I sometimes see these and I watch them for amusement, but no one should take any of them seriously. They're
Are you
all
like,
AI.
wow, that's such a great point, Professor Marandi?
No, it's just interesting how similar they look to me, and I'm pretty sure that in a year from now they'll look and sound more like me than I do.
Well, they can never replace the real Professor Marandi. We always love and appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking your time out to join us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. That was Professor Marandi. Really appreciate him. Really value him. Great interview. Great pieces of knowledge and information. How much have we learned from that? A lot. I think we asked, because our knowledge base is so much, we're able to ask questions that maybe others don't. And we got a lot of depth and breadth from that. Guys, if you're watching this video, like this video, share this video, comment in the main section, let your friends and family know about it, and subscribe to this channel. This video is on our Moral Resistance channel. Send this channel to all your friends and family. This should be the channel you're following. We stream it live on our main channel, Suleiman Ahmed X. And then we always put the video out on Moral Resistance. So make sure you're following us on Moral Resistance. And we would really, really appreciate it. Like, comment, and subscribe. What's your thoughts in the comments about Professor Marandi's interview? Do you agree with him in terms of some of the positions he stated, some of the ideas he relayed, some of the thoughts and perspectives he gave us? Let me know your comments. Appreciate you guys. Like, comment, and subscribe. Appreciate you guys joining in. Appreciate you guys listening. And for sure, we'll see you next time. And